What I find interesting is that
So
people are
what?
still getting, like you're talking about 82, 80 plus days on market, and people are still getting 97% of the asking price. That to me is surprising.
Well,
Like people are
that's
just sellers are just holding out. Like no, this is the price we want. We're not budging.
that's
We'll
the
wait. We'll
thing.
wait 3 months.
The majority are holding out, or they're dropping a little bit and then holding out for that. The ones that have to sell are selling.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast with your hosts, Paul Stevenson, David Warren, and Greg Campbell. Let's see what's going on in the world of real estate today.
Hello, welcome back to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for everything related to the vibrant, dynamic real estate market in the capital city of Canada. I'm your host, Paul Stevenson, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-hosts, Greg Campbell and David Warren. Together, we bring you a wealth of knowledge and expertise to guide you through the ins and outs of Ottawa's real estate landscape. In each episode, we delve into various aspects of the Ottawa real estate market, featuring interviews with industry experts, discussions on current trends, and practical tips for buyers, sellers, and investors. Our goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions and navigate the real estate landscape with confidence. So whether you're looking to buy or sell a property, explore investment opportunities, or simply stay updated on the local market, join us on the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Wizardry. That's all I can say about that is wizard.
Ready to delve.
Ready to
delve.
delve.
I just need to learn to read, apparently.
We still got to get those shirts made. Do you delve?
Yeah. How was the weekend, gentlemen?
Great. I had a great weekend. Actually, I had a great Friday as well. I had a daddy-daughter day Friday, which was fantastic. Hadn't done that in a long time. And Saturday, why am I confused about my Saturday?
Why am your friend from Japan?
Right, my friend Jeff was visiting from Japan. We moved to Vancouver together when we were 19. He moved to Japan. He actually lives in a little island called Ishigaki off the coast of Taiwan right now, living that island life. And he was in town visiting his parents. So we had a great afternoon, ended up back at the house so you could see the girls. He brought us little mini pineapples. He brought us food from the island, little mini bananas that are like sweet and sour, and these tiny pineapples. One's like a peach one, one's like a regular style one. But we had those. The girls loved it. And he brought little cookies for the girls too. So that was cool. And yesterday was the first day that I didn't do an open house in forever, which was fantastic. And we just had a good little cleanup at home. Fam time. Sorry for taking too much time there of everyone's time.
Lots of time.
How was yours, Dave?
Good. Paul and I were out for dinner with a couple other buddies Friday night. Mediocre service, mediocre food. Good time though.
Oh. Do you tell what restaurant is mediocre?
We'll tell you off air. Don't want to ruin their reputation.
Yeah.
And then Sunday Ollie started soccer. So my 2-year-old started soccer. That was entertaining to bring him to that. So yeah. So productive Sunday, not so much a productive Saturday, but Sunday made up for it.
Dude, productive all around. Everything in life can be productive.
What was great is that as Dave knows now, I've been doing a dry January. So Friday was quite dry for me, watching all my friends have a great time and delve into some beverages. But I felt amazing on Saturday morning, super productive and had a great weekend. So
did you have some mocktails, NA beer?
No, you know what the problem? I made a mistake. I had a cappuccino at like 8, and then at 4 a.m. on Friday night, I was still just wired at home. It was a late night, but not for the right reasons. It was too much caffeine. Market's hot, gentlemen. Seems everything's picking up. We were right.
Great segue.
We were right. No, I was saying March seems like March 21st is the go-to day right now. The last few APSs I've seen have all been March 21st. And this is what I was saying. I think, over the next 2-3 months, we're going to see a lot of offers going in, a lot of closings happening between March and May was my guess, but we're seeing it. So
that's good. Greg,
no open houses, but what are you seeing? What are you seeing on your side?
What am I seeing? I'm seeing a lot. You know what? I've got a little bit of stats for Orleans, but I think maybe it might be a good time to bring in our guest, seeing that he lives in Orleans now, and we can talk about that a bit. Why don't we do that? Should I intro it?
Yeah, do it.
I love where this goes. The show just goes places. We have Nicholas Crouch. He's a broker from Real Broker Ontario Limited, and we worked together in the past. We're buds, and he's right here. How are you, Nick?
Good, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Ready to delve.
You're ready to delve. Yeah, we want it. We want you to delve because you do some things that others haven't or won't, and I think that's pretty cool. So let's start with this. Let me get into some statistics for Orleans because it's always interesting. And as being that you are there now, and I know you study the market and numbers. I'm just going to do some basics here. I have no chart, everyone. So everyone who's watching this looking for a graphic, I do not have that. You're just going to have to listen to me and read captions later and go back and reverse. Maybe you'll find it in a short. Anyways, excuse me. In Orleans, in the last 2 weeks, first 2 weeks of January, detached two-story homes. I went specific on this one, two-story homes. 52 active. $942,000 is the average price, and the current average days on market is 82. We had 3 conditional sales at $798,000, averaging 62 days on market, and we had 8 sold at a price of $747,000, averaging 79 days on market. In 2023, we had 10 sold at $738,000 and 93 days on market. So that's interesting that the sold information now is basically the same as it was last year, except last year was a little bit longer on market because that, like, last December was kind of at the beginning of, well, when things started getting kind of weird before it picked up again. Townhome semis, 38 active, averaging 617,000, 68 days on market, 6 conditional sales at $617,000 again, 28 days on market. So that's interesting. So some came in probably at a lower price and sold quickly. And sold quickly conditional. We had 6 sold at $565,000 at 54 days on market. And in 2023, we only had 4 sold at $589,000 at 82 days on market. So days on market are less over the last 2 weeks than it was last year. Condos, 37 active condos. $478,000 is the average price, 73 days on market. 5 conditionally sold at $408,000, 37 days on market. Sorry, conditionally sold, yes. 1 sold, $384,000 at 54 days on market. But last year, we had 11 sold at the same time at $360,000 at 77 days on market. Now, for the condos, I know that's pretty skewed because there was 2 monsters down at Petrie Island at Petrie's Landing that were like $800,000 condos. They've been on the market for a long time. So I think the 380 to 400 is a better representation of where the condos are at in Orleans. Rentals, 57 active rentals in Orleans. $2,800 is the average price, 46 days on market. There's 1 conditional right now, $3,200, 14 days on market, fancy one. And we had 14 rented at $2,550, 42 days on market. Last year, there were 30 rented at the same time at $2,300 and 42 days on market. So the days on market for rentals is the same. The price is up, and homes are selling at 97% of the list price. In January 2022, 2023, the list price to sales ratio was just a little bit higher, 98%, 98.5. But in January 2022, when everyone knows it was crazy, it was 111,000. So many numbers. 111%. So many numbers. Don't get confused. Just listen.
Our heads just exploded. I asked Greg what's going on the inside. And he turns into a mathematician over there and starts doing numbers.
I had to do it, but I think what's key about all of this is that the sales prices are similar to last year. Like, they're not that much different right now. But the days on market was longer last year. So
what I find interesting is that people are still getting, like, you're talking about 80 plus days on market, and people are still getting 97% of the asking price. That to me is surprising.
Well,
like, people are just sellers are just holding out. Like, this is the price we want. We're not budging. We'll wait 3 months,
The majority are holding out, or they're dropping a little bit and then holding out for that. The ones that have to sell are selling, and that's what's bringing the numbers down a bit. Nick, what do you think about that?
I think you guys all have very valid points. I mean, I'm looking at, so you were talking about Orleans specifically, right?
Mhm.
What I have is my frame of reference, and maybe you guys want me to talk about a little bit of what I've been tracking over the last 3 years and the stats that I look at. I mean, they're very in line with basically what you've been saying in Orleans, is that every week I've been tracking things just like you have: average list price, average sold price, list to sale price ratio. And when I go back from, last week to the same time last year, we're seeing the average sale price roughly as an aggregate of Ottawa proper, because what I do is I track Ottawa proper. It's very important for anyone who's listening to remember that every month when you see someone post Ottawa Real Estate Board stats, they don't necessarily reflect the true nature of Ottawa proper, because it's very important to remember that there are other real estate boards that are part of the Ottawa Real Estate Board. We have Renfrew, we have Cornwall. I think there's one more that I'm forgetting. But all that to say, those average prices that you see are also including the average sale prices of all of those areas. So you may think, wow, the average sale price in Ottawa is, I'm just throwing out a number, 650,000, but really the average has been suppressed because we have lower price points further outside the city. So what I noticed was that there was a lack of communication transparency in that data sharing. So I started tracking the numbers for Ottawa proper. So what you're saying, Greg, is very in line with what I've been tracking. Another interesting thing that I have been looking at myself and that I recently just started tracking was the occupancy type and the price point of the sales that happen week to week. So for example, the majority of homes that I have seen, almost 1-for-1 since I've been tracking it since November, have been owner and vacant every week. Tenant is by far the least sold occupancy type of any property. But when it comes to owner and vacant homes, they're almost 1-for-1, which I thought was a very interesting stat, because that means there's a lot of people with empty homes. It's not just owners, very potentially could be investors. And then as well as price points, you were talking about that, those monsters that sold in Orleans, lots of very interesting price activity, but a majority for freehold properties are, I think last week out of the 51 sales that I tracked for Ottawa proper last week, the majority of them were in the 500 to 750 range, and the condos are 250 to 499 range on average.
Yeah. I love it. And I love that comment about Ottawa proper, because I've always, I mentioned that occasionally on the show when we run the stats about how much I hate it.
Yeah, I think it goes almost all the way out to Brockville, right? Like almost Thousand Islands-ish. Like it's
I think it is the biggest, most horrible thing that the board has put out for consumers, because they don't even explain that to consumers. They just say in Ottawa, all of these properties sold, but that's really not the case. You compare, what Greg or I track against what the real estate board's putting out every month. It's completely
the same.
Black and white. They're two different things. They don't even look the same.
Nick, Greg mentioned before we came on the show, but you're on a board, right, with the real estate board or some form of ethics committee. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what your role is there?
Sure. So I'm not currently a sitting member, but all of last year for 2023, I was a sitting member on what's called the Professional Standards and Ethics Committee, otherwise known as PSC. And basically, PSC's mandate is to hear complaints from either the general public or other realtors, and to file complaints against registrants, so us, real estate agents, for either breaches of our MLS rules or our realtor code of conduct. Now, it's very important to remember that those two things that we're able to actually rule on, because there are other things that go outside of our purview, like if it was a breach of RICO or CREA or something like that, the Real Estate Council of Ontario or the Canadian Real Estate Association, because in those particular cases, we would have to defer the complaint to those governing bodies. It wouldn't be something that we actually have the authority to rule on. But yeah, so basically how it would work at PSC is, let's say, going back to the two things that we have to focus on is the MLS rules or a realtor code of conduct breach. So a lot of times And I know over the last 2 years when the market was crazy and we were withholding offers, realtors had rules that we had to follow when we were posting these properties on MLS, whether it was conveyancing to other agents and telling them that we had received other offers, changing public remarks, stuff like that. Nothing overly major, but all that to say we had rules of how this had to be done. So if there were ever any breaches, an agent would file a complaint. We would hear the complaint, and there's a formal process. Anyone, whether an agent or a member of the public, can go on the Ottawa Real Estate Board website and file a complaint with this form. And they would attach any relevant documents, and we were essentially the investigators. That's what we did. So we would hear these, and then we'd have to go through all of the facts, and depending on what it was, again, if it was a clear violation of anything that fell within our purview, we had the authority to set fines or any type of, I don't want to say reprimand, but we were able to either set fines for those agents up to a certain amount of money, or recommend that they go through further education, or reach out to their broker of record or something like that. Or if it was something that was more severe, what we would do at that point is we would refer it to the discipline committee. And then the discipline committee is where you really don't want to go. It's very formal. It's like a proper, court setting.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very formal. I mean, that's where you don't want to go. But yeah, so that's basically what we did. It was very interesting, to say the least. And I'm not sure how in depth you guys want me to go. I obviously can't talk about specific cases, maybe, touch a little bit about my thoughts on how these things go, because I did notice that in the year that I was there, the difficulties that I encountered as probably the youngest member of this board, I would say the average age was probably around 55 or 60. So I was by far the youngest person there. And there was a lot of, granted, it was my first time dealing with any type of governing body and dealing with the politics that go with that. I did find it extremely frustrating at the pace that it moved. So it left me a little disheartened at the end of the year, because I don't necessarily think that we had the opportunity to really address some problems that members of the public or other agents had been coming into. It was a lot of bureaucracy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't want that to dissuade anyone from, submitting complaints if they have any, but as someone who was on the inside and now looking back in from the outside, I think there was a lot of things that, could be implemented to help expedite these processes, because, it shouldn't take 3-4 hours to come to the conclusion that something's wrong when it's so glaringly obvious. Just a lot of random conversations that don't really produce anything. But yeah, so that was the Professional Standards and Ethics Committee. Again, like I have nothing but good things to say about the agents that were there. I just think that the processes that are in place were maybe for a time where things moved a little bit slower. And I think members of the public or other agents who have, are concerned enough that they feel like they need to come forward and submit a complaint deserve to have those things answered and responded to in a timely fashion. I just don't think.
And how busy was it last year?
It was nonstop.
Really?
It was nonstop. It was really, I mean, you also have to understand is that in this complaint process, it's not anonymous, right? So if you feel like, let's just say Greg had a problem with something that I had done. If you feel so strongly that you're going to go forward and file a complaint, there may be some animosity between the parties, but in order to keep things transparent, you need to know who's filing the complaint. So it may dissuade some people from actually moving forward with those. So I can only assume, because we ultimately did not vet every single complaint. They went through to an admissions department that would look at them, and they would tell members of
triage.
Yeah, and ask if they're certain that they want to do this.
Exactly. That was exactly it. So what we ended up having on our desk was maybe, I can only guess, but I would say maybe half of the complaints or maybe a quarter of the complaints that we ultimately received. And in any 3-hour to 4-hour session, because that's usually what they were, we would be meeting once a month to hear all of these complaints. So you can only imagine, I mean, sometimes it wasn't a lot, sometimes there was up to 5 or 6. And if you get bogged down and like I was saying,
on the first one,
in just one, and it could be a moot point. I had at one point, there was a debate about whether voting yay or nay one specific way on a case should be done anonymously by members of the board, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. But that went back and forth for like 2 hours. So we ended up, we're behind, then we're not able to hear all the cases, and they get rolled into the next one. So it was a constant stream all the time.
So
now,
2 meetings a month would be good.
Probably more. But the thing is that you have to understand this is run on a volunteer basis.
Right.
This isn't something where people are paid. This is people who genuinely care about the well-being of, and the perception of the business as a whole. Right.
I mean, that should really be a paid position. Like that seems like a very important aspect of the industry. And from your experience, like when you were doing that, was the majority of the complaints like one realtor towards another realtor as far as like how they handled a certain specific client, or was it more a client thinking that their realtor, gave them incorrect advice or directed them the wrong way? Like,
that's a great question. So I can tell you, when it comes to someone filing a complaint against their own agent, giving them wrong advice, that would be more of a like CREA issue, right? Because we only dealt with MLS and Realtor Code of Conduct, right? So Code of Conduct, I'm not trying to downplay. If anyone listening to this has ever filed a complaint, I'm not trying to downplay anything that you've ever complained about. But realistically, it was a lot of, this person gave me attitude, like there was a lot of that. But I would say the number one thing that I saw all the time, and this was coming from agents and members of the public, usually sellers, was that people weren't showing up for their showings. So we have access through showing time where we can book our showings, and everyone is pretty much kept apprised of what's going on. It's not difficult to cancel a showing. We have people who just wouldn't show up, and you have to understand, it's one thing if the property's vacant, and again, I'm not suggesting that you don't cancel your appointment just because the property's vacant and then not show up, but you have instances where you have families, they have to clean the house, children, they're ready, it's a whole to-do, and they end up leaving, and of course, it's always during a snowstorm or something like that. And they leave the house and the agent just never shows up. They can see on the Ring doorbell, no one ever came. The agent never thought to call the listing agent or to cancel the showing and give a reason why. I would say that was probably 60% of what I heard.
Wow.
Most of the time, because it's more of a code of conduct issue, right? And then when it comes to MLS, a lot of just improper inputting of data, which could, though, mislead members of the public, Maybe the lot was severed and you didn't say it was severed, and someone bought the whole lot thinking it was one, but it wasn't, and stuff like that.
Speaking of code of conduct, I just want to interject here for a second. And snowstorm. I was going to a showing in the snowstorm when it first happened, and it was a 30-minute drive, and it was snowing, and we were coming from the east end going to the west end, had to go back east after, and we get there and we show it, and my guys want to submit an application, and then I call the agent, and the agent tells me that they're just about to sign off on an accepted offer. So speaking of code of conduct, I was like, I just didn't say anything because I'm kind of past those conversations. I'm just like, okay, thanks, man. And then I call the client, and I'm like, rule number one, not rule number one in real estate, but one of the top rules, just appreciate your colleagues, give us a call and just say, we're about to sign. Do you still want to see it in case something happens? The answer would have been immediately, absolutely not. And then my client,
simple respect of time,
in love with it. They want to see it. So
that's exactly it. Not to spend too much more time on it, but the issue that I have that has now become so glaringly obvious is that, and I can only speak from what I've seen at a complaint level on the back end, is that there is such a lack of basic professionalism sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's very disheartening, because the ones of us who do things like that, who actually let people know and have some degree of professionalism, like it hurts us. It makes us look bad when we're not the people doing that.
It seems like common courtesy, like just, hey, we're not coming anymore.
Not so common.
Respect of time.
Respect of time. Exactly. So
let's on your one quick question for you, Nick, though, before we move on your exit of that role, was there a way in which you could break down the issues that you saw within the board for that year in order to help them expedite those cases and see more? Or was it just
funny
like
that you bring that up?
Away?
So I'm a little bit of I'm trying to put it politely. I'm a little bit of a pain in the behind for the board sometimes. I was very vocal throughout the entire process for that whole year of what I thought was appropriate versus what I thought was not appropriate. And there was multiple instances during these hearings where I was the only person who was saying, that makes no sense. Why are we doing this? Like, to the point where it would get me a little bit upset, because you're in a room of 13, 14 other people and they're all just kind of agreeing to go with the flow. And I'm stopping it to say, why are we doing this? So all that to say, throughout the entire year, I was very vocal. There was other issues with the MLS and the tech committee in regards to tools that real estate agents have access to that I was extremely vocal about. And I'll put it to you this way. I was not invited back to sit on any of the committees this year.
So you're that big a pain in their ass that they said, the hell with this guy.
Nick's telling them everything that they need to hear, but they don't want to hear it.
Yep, absolutely. Which was kind of funny. I remember I submitted my application and a couple of days later, I look at the email. I'm like, not accepted. What the hell is going on here? And then people are asking me why I'm not on any of the committee. Anyway,
this guy wants to be too
declined
efficient.
from a volunteer position. You got declined.
You're gonna get reported to the committee about your ethics because you're too efficient.
By the committee.
Yeah, no, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't want anything that I've said for any members of the public to dissuade them for actually proceeding, because believe it or not, even though I may have painted it with a little bit of a bad brush, things do get done, albeit at a very slow slope.
You went with a tint. It wasn't a full black paint. It was more of a tint, you know.
Yeah, just a little
shade.
Just a little
shade. Let's get into the speaking of ethics, as you mentioned, Paul. Let's roll that into the Carleton Place development.
Yeah, so I'm obviously, love CP. I'm out there often, and there was a lot of homes that came up for sale recently for much under what they were originally paid for. So there was a clip that we had from CTV. Maybe Stephen, if you want to just roll that clip, and then they'll explain the gist of it, and then we can touch on it afterwards.
Some families in Carleton Place.
We now know that it is much larger than we originally were told. Nearly half of the development, or 40 to 50 buyers, defaulted on their contracts and walked away from original deals to buy at sky-high prices. The newly built townhomes are located on and around Hooper Street in Carleton Place. CTV's Natalie Van Roy is back from CP with the latest on this. Natalie.
Well, Patricia, we now know, like you mentioned, around 40 families defaulted and were unable to afford their home after purchasing at the peak of the housing market 2 years ago, before interest rates increased.
In this newly built neighborhood in Carleton Place, 40 families couldn't close on their properties because their monthly payments skyrocketed as interest rates rose.
Unfortunately, after a year of waiting to get the places built, and then during that year we had the influx of the interest rates, just caused too much pain for a lot of people, and they just walked away.
This was after putting down thousands of dollars in a deposit, ranging from $20,000 to $60,000 or more.
I was stunned to hear that they were charging $900,000 for them. That was nuts, I thought. But I mean, they're nice enough places, but they're not $1 million homes, right?
Olympia is the builder. They tell CTV News that they returned the deposits for those who could no longer afford the properties. And they say they aren't going to sue, even though they could.
As we have seen, interest rates can spike dramatically in a short period of time. But that doesn't mean that a buyer still doesn't have legal obligations to the contract that they've signed.
We had this unbelievable ramp up in prices in 2021. There are many regions, and certainly the Ottawa region is one, where we saw price increases of nearly 30%, and some cases more.
The peak price was $800,000 to $900,000. 40 to 50 buyers couldn't make the payments when construction finished. The developer says he resold 5 of them at a Christmas special for just under $500,000. 7 to 10 of the customers who paid the highest prices remain in the neighborhood.
Currently, right now, the 5 that we have relisted, we have successfully sold. It looks like to me that there's others going to be put on the market in the next week or so.
Other homes will be on the market at higher prices, but not nearly as high as the original sale price.
That's a pretty wild situation, right? Like those buyers, Dave, I know you're commenting on a few other situations where, builders have actually canceled contracts to relist later. But in this case, like buying that townhome at 900,000, like at the time, you probably have people from outside the city that thought, like from Toronto, like, oh, this is the new spot, fastest growing. I think Carleton Place was fastest growing city in Canada at one point. So people probably got in there thinking like, oh, this will be worth over $1 million in a couple of years, and went the complete opposite way. So are you guys seeing that more often with builders? Like what have you seen? And do you know anyone that was directly connected with those places out in Carleton Place?
I don't know. Oh, David, did you want to go ahead there?
You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry, just
go first.
Like about to
just
get
go
in
first.
There.
Sorry. No, go first.
I was just going to say, I don't know anyone direct to that build, but interesting story about a property in Orleans. I'm not going to get into details here, but it sold for just under $1 million, brand new, spectacular home. And, it was originally purchased for 1.2 million with all the finishings. So that's what, 225,000 under what they originally paid. And they lost that money. They sold because they couldn't close on it. So but I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what that's all about. Like you lose 225, you can't close. What's the difference there? Where's the balance in that? I guess you just don't want to be on the hook for that amount of time.
I don't know anyone who's personally connected to that, but when you guys want to talk about like that, just the whole situation in general and how it even got to that, I'm ready to jump in.
Yeah. Jump
I do
in.
know.
Go ahead.
Like I know of there is a builder out in Rockland that there's a street of townhomes that the last unit is owned by the builder. The townhomes closed even 3 weeks ago, a month ago, for 750,000. They've listed the last unit, exact same finishings and everything else as the others, for 550,000. Yeah. So they waited till everyone else closed, and then they listed for 200,000 less. And so all of those homeowners now, all of those comparables. So I know of one of the buyers that bought that they're down 200,000 immediately in value because their comp's not going to be there. They're pooched.
There's some,
and it's a townhome, like 750 to 550 is a huge drop.
And that number is exactly what's leading me to this comment. There are some builds in the surrounding areas, like in Rockland, where the townhome would have been 750 is now 550, and the singles are listed at 750. I'm seeing it at EQ in Campbell, and I'm also seeing it at where was the other location? There's another spot, but that $200,000 seems to be the average for builds. Oh, sorry, this is the other thing. There's an assignment sale in the same location that's to be built, and they're trying to sell it for 750. And there's no way. And then most of the other ones that were trying to sell on the other street, they turned into rentals because they couldn't sell them at even like 7, 650, 630, 6.
They just need something to cover themselves. I mean, I think this whole thing is kind of indicative of what happened. This is all, to me, from COVID, because what ended up happening, the city got way too expensive. Where's everyone going to start looking? Oh, well, we don't have to go to the office anymore. It's too expensive in the city. We're going to start looking on the periphery, right? And then, quite honestly, I think a lot of these builders took advantage of that, because there is no way, and I know all of us have been in a new build, whether it be in Arnprior or Carleton Place or Cornwall, and the quality is not even the same as what you would find in Ottawa, right? And you're seeing people pay 800, 900,000 for a place all the way out in Carleton Place. That's absurd. And it sucks for these people who, quite frankly, got taken to the cleaners, because those places are never going to be as resilient as the city. I mean, realistically, if you go back, Greg, to what you were talking about, just in regards to stats, the inner city or Ottawa proper has been so much more resilient. Always going to be outliers, right? Like you could find, I'm sure, a sale in Ottawa proper in the last year that took a big shave, but those are few and far between, I would say. out in the periphery, like Carleton, like you're seeing this happen all over the place. This is just the one that made the news. You're seeing people, okay, well, we paid 700 for it. Now they're selling for 550 or 6, or, you know, going back to what I was saying, a lot of homes now that are being sold are vacant. You know, you're seeing a lot of these newer builds that people are buying. They never had the intention of moving into them. And now they're stuck with huge assignment fees because the developer did not want them doing assignment sales, you know, things like that. And it's really, really a shame to see that.
Well, it's like that resident so aptly said, these are $1 million homes, you know.
That guy was amazing.
Hey, them boys from Deep River there. I actually had a client. So to talk about like polar opposites, I might have already discussed this on the show. So just stop me if I've already told this story, but I had a client who bought a townhome, 550. It was now worth 450, like around 450, they thought. So it was down 100 grand from when they bought it. They were debating selling, but I told them, like, if you sell, you're literally like the mortgage was 470, the property's worth 450. So like you're putting yourself like voluntarily into a huge hole. They had some cash. And so we talked about the option. I said, you know, you're in a position now where if you sell, you're going to take a massive loss, or you could technically convert this into a rental property, get rental income until the value comes back up again, and use the cash you have and buy a new primary residence to live in. So they went from basically having, now they didn't end up doing this. We just had this conversation initially, but it went from basically being on the verge of like claiming bankruptcy to now having 2 properties. Like, it's so crazy how close, like that line is so thin between like essentially bankruptcy or now having an investment property, you know? And it's just from the advice. And I'm not suggesting that was what was best for them, but certainly selling wasn't the best option. I think in the end, the best option, at least when we had our discussion for them specifically, was just stay in the home, kind of bite the bullet for another year or 2 until the values do come back up, and then look at options again, you know? But it's such a thin line between those two that, like, as advisors, I almost had to laugh getting off the phone to be like, this is so crazy that they could sell and take a massive loss and be in a hole, or they could literally buy another place, convert this to a rental, and now have 2 properties, which again creates its own problems and stress and so on. Not saying that was the best solution, but just the fact that there is that solution is kind of wild, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like I was saying, you're seeing a lot of that. It just depends on who's giving you the right information and what you decide to do. Mm-hmm. There's no, you know, you just have to make that call. So that's a great story of, you know, success.
So I guess I didn't tell that.
I don't think I've ever heard that one.
It's true what you guys are talking about, though, from the, you know, advisory aspect. It's, you know, and it's great to hear that that's the kind of information that you're giving to your clients, because, you know, what's the normal perception of what we do as a whole with the general public? Like, oh, they're just here to sell a house, you're just here to do this. Like, you know, when you're advising them to do something proper, like, hey, you know what, here are your options, and you're not looking for a sale, which I think unfortunately a lot of agents are just like, oh yeah, list the house. It's great that you're able to do that for your clients. It just goes to show the kind of business that you run, and that's fantastic.
Nick, you are probably the only agent that I know who I've spoken with ever that does a lot of work on Reddit.
Yes.
Do you mind delving into that a little bit for our listeners and for us?
I have no problem delving into it. I'll even tell you guys what it is I do, because I very, very highly doubt there's a single other agent who's going to do it.
I know.
I've been doing this so long, my skin is thick. But if it wasn't already apparent to anyone listening, you can splash across the street. I am the Ottawa agent on Reddit. And what I've been doing for the past, it's going to be almost 5 years now, is I have been sharing. Well, I changed the kind of model within the last couple of years, but what I was doing before is I was hosting what's called AMAs, or Ask Me Anythings, on Reddit, because I noticed a huge gap. When I first got my license many, many years ago, I had noticed that people were going on Reddit. I'd never even used it, but I had friends of mine who were saying, hey, Nick, there's someone on Reddit asking for a real estate agent. You should go and message them. I'd never been on Reddit. I go on, and it's the typical, like when you're in a Facebook group with real estate agents, I'm looking for an agent in Ottawa, and there's like 37 people that comment. Like, I'll do it. So
DM me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I see on Reddit. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't really, like, I don't see the benefit to me doing anything here. And then I saw another realtor, whoever you are, you got to reach out to me, because thank you for that amazing idea. They did AMA. And I said, that's a hell of a great idea. I need to do something like that. So if you went all to my profile, and I'll send you guys that so you can put in the show notes. But if you went to my profile all the way to my first post, it's basically like 2 sentences saying, I'm a realtor, ask me some questions, like just some like generic stuff like that. It was so bad. And then you see people like, screw you, go die. Like no one's asking me anything, right? And this went on for months and months and months. And then I kind of switched it around. So what I was doing was that every month I was basically saying, hey, look, I'm just here to answer any questions that you have, whether it's about, where to best put your money for home improvements, average days on market. It was very broad strokes, and it slowly started picking up. So right now, I think I have about 900 followers on Reddit, on the Ottawa subreddit, and my posts are getting on average, and you have to keep in mind, none of this is advertised. This is just straight me posting, anywhere from 45 to 55,000 eyeballs on it, probably a dozen or 2 dozen shares. The downvotes and upvotes are different. A lot of people, like I said, just the general public does not like real estate agents, and that's okay. I get it. Everyone, if you don't like a real estate agent, you're more than, able to sell it yourself. But I've been doing that. And what I switched it to do now is now every week, those stats that I was talking about, every single Monday. So right after we get off this call, I make a post with everything that's happened in the last week, because I thought it was a quicker way to send out the information instead of waiting every month for, here's your market update from OREB every week. So I've actually been putting this in an Excel or a Google Drive, for the last 3 years. So anybody who goes on to Reddit, the Ottawa subreddit, and sees my posts, you can click that hyperlink and you can bookmark that, and you can follow along every Monday where I track all these stats. I don't advertise. I don't say, hey, come use me. I would say any and all of the business that I've ever received from Reddit has been people reaching out to me, because Reddit's a little bit of a fickle, if you come on and it's very self-promoting. I mean, I've had people try and dox me. I've said people were going to come, like people said they were going to come to my office and shoot me, like all types of stuff. Reddit is a really disturbed, weird place.
You were like, please come to me.
Well, that's exactly it. They don't know I'm 6'3" and 260 pounds. I'm like, okay, sure. Whatever you want to do.
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been like quite honestly, all jokes aside, it has been probably the number one most, educational thing for me, because it keeps me accountable. Not only do I have to do the posts every Monday, which I have been doing diligently for like 4 years. Even when I'm on vacation, I'll be like in Colombia or Mexico or something, and I'm doing the stats. But it also keeps me like ears to the ground, what the general public's talking about. It's not like a really small sample size. Like I have, it's not like I'm having a whole bunch of comments on it, but I'm usually getting like 40 or 50 comments on each post. And it's a good enough sample size where consistently every week I have a pretty good idea of what people and consumers are concerned about, And it's been such a fantastic way for me to stay on top of the market, because going back to what we were talking about with these committees, I go in and I say, well, look, I know what consumers want for the most part, because I hear it every week. You guys are sitting in an office. You have no way of there's no community outreach where you're actively soliciting feedback from the general public. I have, for, the last 4 years been doing that. And I have a whole body of work that I can now reference and say, well, this is it's all there. It's all in black and white. It's right there.
Yeah, I think it's important when you're having conversations like this or doing podcasts like this, that you're actually active and not just hearing it from other people or headlines, and just you used to do something and now you're not, but you're like this voice. There's just more of an honesty perspective, I guess, when you're actively working.
Well, it is. And on top of that, going back to my point about just transparency in general. And, you know, Paul, when you were talking about the advice that you had given to your clients, it all comes down to, you know, I understand as someone who has been on Reddit, and like all of us do, just because we're in the real estate industry, that the general perception of our industry is not that good, right?
No.
So I go into, you know, Reddit or my general discussions with anyone who's interested with that in the back of my mind. So I'm always trying to say, you know what, how can I make them know and feel like I'm not some sleazy salesman just trying to get a sale? That's, you know, leading with, here's the information. Don't believe what I tell you just because I'm telling you. This is what I'm referencing. This is what I track. This is what these things mean. This is how they affect you know, and I give them access to
educate.
That. Exactly.
Education.
The biggest issue that I had with the board was that they wanted to, you know, there's still quite a few people there that really want to withhold information because, you know, back in the day, you had the binder and you were the guy. You had all the information for that point of contact. Now, when I go and show a home, I have some clients who, like, their whole hobby outside of work is being on House Sigma. That's all. They're sending me properties sometimes before I even have a chance to look at it. Like, hey, so I saw this. They know what's going on. If you try and sit back and say, well, I don't know this, like, you know what? Those days are gone. They don't exist. Consumers have access to the same, if not arguably, depending on which board you're in, better information than we do, and they're getting it quicker. So unless you're able to have a conversation about the information that they're giving you and break it down properly, and you don't know your information, then you're screwed. You know, it's really turned into that. They've turned into what we were 20 years ago. You know,
you really need to know. You know, there's been some scenarios too where, you know, a client or a past client or friend of whatever will say something to me, and I'm just like, man, like I should know that, or I should have that answer. I should always have that answer, you know. But sometimes you just get, it's like, wow.
It keeps you honest, honestly. Like it really, really does. And that's the best part about that. And, you know, bringing it back to Reddit is that I have to know what I'm talking about, because if I have one misstep on Reddit, there's always someone, there's some people where all they do, their entire life's work is to just sit on Reddit and correct people. That's all they do. Okay? Not in a nice way. Not a, hey, Nick, you know, like you should probably think about this. Like, hey, you dumbass, like go, like they don't care. They don't care. So you got to know what you're talking about. So it's been very humbling. But
the old keyboard jockeys.
Exactly.
Keyboard jockeys.
The keyboard jockeys that send you like death threats. Like they're just, it's wild. So all that to say, it's kept me super, super in the know. And it's forced me to kind of evaluate how I want to approach my business in regards to just interacting with consumers. And sometimes it's great too, because you end up in conversations that kind of force you to see it from a different perspective. Because I think we're all guilty of just because, oh, there is that, are those your stats, Greg, that I see in the corner? Sorry.
I don't know what that is.
Anyway, all that to say, it forces you to kind of have these really, really good conversations with your clients, sometimes potentially, you know, change your opinion, because we're guilty of looking through everything we do on the lens of, we're like, we've sold real estate 1 million times, you know, we've listed houses, we've done all these things, but we forget that consumers, for the most part, are maybe only doing this once or twice.
Did you see that link come up there? They're your stats, Nick.
Yes, I did. So anyone who's looking at this, again, you get in the show notes. If you go on my Reddit profile, you can just go directly to any weekly review that I do. There's quite a lot of information. I do apologize. This is just me, and shout out Kevin Morris for setting this up for me.
Oh, he's nice.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's a little messy, but you know, I'm making do with what I got. And there's a whole like start here page, so you guys can reference the first page, but there's a lot of information in there, and it's by week. So it's not like I'm only doing this once a month. It's every single week, and I've been doing it for, you know, almost 4 years.
Yeah, we've found the same thing. Like we've talked about this before, the three of us, that doing the show every week actually does the exact same thing for us. Like it keeps us sharp. We hear something from Greg, or I hear something from Dave, or what have you, that I can implement into my business. And I think a lot of the people that are listening to the show are also either clients that want to have their finger on the pulse, or other people in the industry that use this as well as a way to kind of stay hip to the no. Is that what they say? Is that what the cool kids say?
Hip to the no.
Hip to the no.
To stay lit.
100% though. I mean, anything like this is going to force you just by nature of what you're doing to stay current with what's going on. Mine's more data driven. It seems like you guys are hitting up news articles. You got stats, you got a little bit of everything, which is great, but you're going over what everybody's talking about. Outside of our circles, what everyone's talking about, at least real estate wise, is what happened in Carleton Place.
It's very important. It's very important for, any client or professional in this space, whether you're mortgages or a realtor, to be armed with information, as much information as possible, so you can help your clients make the most informed decision for the biggest purchase of their life. And like you said, Nick, earlier, is they might do it once, twice, 3 times most in their life in a lot of cases. So going into it being well armed with all of that information, and it's great that you're providing that educational stats, because as people kind of take that time to make that big purchase, that they're going in well informed, and it makes it an easier decision for them and more comfortable with it. Because the worst thing is that's when you also get complaints, is when people aren't going in informed and they're making a rush judgment or a rush decision, and then they sit back and they say, what the hell did I just do? Oh shit. And that becomes like, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing to hear from somebody.
That's 100% it. And again, I can't speak for the agent specifically that helped in Carleton Place, but what would have happened had the people who were helping them buy that house said, hey, what if something happens in the market in a year? Like just the simple act of what if, what if it may have caused some pause. I mean, at that point, if you've said that and they still go ahead, that's not necessarily your fault. But like you said, if they're only doing it a couple times in their lifetime, and you're leading with this type of information, but also just wanting to provide that type of comfort and knowing that they're speaking with a professional. If you're lucky, they'll use you for those 2 or 3 times and, hopefully refer you to your other clients, their friends rather.
So Nick, we know you're the Ottawaagent on Reddit. Where else can everyone find you if they wanted to keep in touch with you?
If you're looking to connect, you can reach me on Instagram or my email. Again, we'll put everything in the show notes. My website is currently under development, so I will not direct you there.
Okay, that's awesome. Should we roll into the mood boost, gentlemen?
Boost my mood, Paul.
Let's do it.
That was an awesome show, packed with info. And we want to thank Nicholas Crouch for being here today, sharing his insights, his experience. So Nick, we end the show typically, I don't know if you've watched the show or not, but we usually end with a couple mood boosts just to get everyone smiling going into their weeks. So I got 4 today. I like them. So I like them, obviously. Number 1, 5 ants moved into an apartment, and then another 5 ants moved in with them. They are now tenants. Number 2, why did the pirate walk the plank? Because he couldn't find his dog.
Wow.
Number 3, a cheese factory exploded in France. Debris is everywhere. And last but not least, number 4, how do you deal with a fear of speed bumps? You slowly get over it. Ease into the week.
Ease into the week.
I had a few others, but I'll save them. Thanks everyone for tuning in. As always, make sure to subscribe on all our channels. We're on YouTube and every other major streaming podcast streaming platform. And shows come out every Tuesday at 10 a.m. So as always, comment, like, subscribe, share, and check out Nick Crouch on Reddit. We'll definitely be on there, and we'll see how many death threats he gets this week.
All right.
See you, boys. Next week.
Take care.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because we'd really like that.